Hello. I just sent my hair clip flying. Sorry. If you've been with me a long time, you know me and my hair. It's an ongoing struggle on live. I need a stylist that comes in and fixes this mop of hair. So sorry about that. I was trying to get the clip because it was all crazy, my ponytail. You guys hopefully love me by now. And if you don't, then don't stay. But I'm going to read. We are on A Tale of Two Cities. We are on book 3, chapter 8, and it's long. This chapter is long. So, honey, hello. It's gotten tense because why? Charles, who remembers where we left off? Charles Darnay just got recaptured, and he is, I'm so glad you did. We're so close to the end, Dinah. I know. I'm so excited. And now we've got this big turn where Charles is recaptured. I'm just letting you know that we know. Remember, I told you before, we know certainly Lucy gets back because there's a reference to that. But I'm not going to give anything else away. But I'm just telling you, we're getting closer and closer to where I cry. I'm not going to tell you anymore. Just know, just keep staying so you can see me cry. Do that quiver where I try and, keep reading, but it just gets me every time. All right, this chapter is called A Hand at Cards. And I think it will take the whole time. I'm going to try and really focus and not get distracted because you can't see how many pages I'm turning. It is a long chapter. So let's read. My gosh, one of my followers, Shirley, could do something with this hair. It needs a good cut. Just remember, I'm really cheap and I don't want to spend money to get it cut. And it grows super fast. And I had it up and then I lost my clip and went flying across the room just as we were starting. So typical me. A Hand at Cards. Happily unconscious of the new calamity at home, Miss Pross is in the market shopping, threaded her way along the narrow streets and crossed the river by the bridge of the Pont Neuf, the 9 Point, reckoning in her mind the number of indispensable purchases she had to make. Mr. Cruncher, with the basket, walked at her side. So all the protectors are gone when they came to arrest Charles Darnay. They looked both to the right and to the left into most of the shops they passed, had a wary eye for all gregarious assemblages of people, gregarious, happy, outgoing, and turned out of their road to avoid any very excited group of talkers. It was a raw evening, and the misty river, blurred to the eye with blazing lights and to the ear with harsh noises, showed where the barges were stationed in which the smiths worked, making guns for the Army Republic. Woe to the man who played tricks with that army or got undeserved promotion in it. Better for him that his beard had never grown, for the national razor shaved him close. Having purchased a few small articles of grocery, and a measure of oil for the lamp, Miss Pross bethought herself of the wine they wanted. After peeping into several wine shops, she stopped at the sign of the good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, not far from the National Palace, once and twice the Tuileries, where the aspect of things rather took her fancy. It had a quieter look than any other place of the same description they had passed, and though red with patriotic caps, was not so red as the rest. Sounding Mr. Cruncher and finding him of her opinion, Miss Pross resorted to the good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, attended by our cavalier, and that would be Jerry Cruncher. Slightly observant of the smoky lights, of the people, pipe in mouth, playing with limp cards and yellow dominoes, and of the one bare-breasted, bare-armed, soot-begrimed workman reading a journal aloud, and of the others listening to him, of the weapons worn or laid aside to be resumed, of the 2 or 3 customers falling forward asleep, who in the popular high-shouldered, shaggy black Spencer looked, in that attitude, like slumbering bears or dogs. The 2 outlandish customers approached the counter and showed what they wanted. Remember, they don't speak French. As their wine was measuring out, a man parted from another man in a corner and rose to depart. In going, he had to face Miss Pross. No sooner did he face her than Miss Pross uttered a scream and clapped her hands. In a moment, the whole company were on their feet. That somebody was assassinated by somebody vindicating a difference of opinion was the likeliest occurrence. Everybody heard the scream and thought there had been an assassination. Everybody looked to see somebody fall, but only saw a man and a woman standing staring at each other. The man with all the outward aspect of a Frenchman and a thorough Republican, the woman evidently English. What was said in this disappointing anticlimax by the disciples of the good Republican Brutus of antiquity, except that it was something very voluble and loud, would have been as so much Hebrew or Chaldean to Miss Pross and her protector, though they had all been ears. So they're all talking, but she doesn't know what they're saying. But they had no ears for anything in their surprise, for it must be recorded that not only was Miss Pross lost in an amazement and agitation, but Mr. Cruncher, though it seemed on his own separate and individual account, was in a state of the greatest wonder. "What is the matter?" said the man who had caused Miss Pross to scream, speaking in a vexed, abrupt voice, though in a low tone and in English. "Solomon, dear Solomon," cried Miss Pross, clapping her hands again. "After not setting eyes upon you or hearing of you for so long a time, do I find you here?" Isn't that her brother's name? "Don't call me Solomon. Do you want to be the death of me?" asked the brother in a furtive, frightened way. Brother, cried Miss Pross, bursting into tears. "Have I ever been so hard with you that you ask me such a cruel question?" "Then hold your meddlesome tongue," said Solomon, "and come out if you want to speak to me. Pay for your wine and come out. Who's this man?" Miss Pross, shaking her loving and dejected head at her by no means affectionate brother, said through her tears, "Mr. Cruncher." "Let him come out too," said Solomon. "Does he think me a ghost?" Apparently Mr. Cruncher did, to judge from his looks. He said not a word, however, and Miss Pross, exploring the depths of her ridicule through her tears, with great difficulty paid for her wine. As she did so, Solomon turned to the followers of the good Republican Brutus of antiquity and offered a few words of explanation in the French language, which caused them all to relapse into their former places and pursuits. "Now," said Solomon, stopping at the dark street corner, "what do you want?" "How dreadfully unkind in a brother. Nothing has ever turned my love away," cried Miss Pross. "To give me such a greeting and show me no affection." She's like, "I've always loved you. I don't deserve. Solomon, why are you being a jerk to me?" "There, confound it. There," said Solomon. "No, I skipped. To give me a greeting and show me no affection? There, confound it. There," said Solomon, making a dab at Miss Pross's lips with his own like a kiss. "Now, are you content?" Miss Pross only shook her head and wept in silence. "If you expect me to be surprised," said her brother Solomon, "I am not surprised. I knew you were here. I know of most people who are here. If you really don't want to endanger my existence, which I half believe you do, go your ways as soon as possible and let me go mine. I'm busy. I'm an official." "My English brother, Solomon," mourned Miss Pross, casting up her tear. "Sonic, it's not paid for. I mean, the drink is paid for, but this is not a paid subscription. This is my daughter kindly brought me Sonic today. It's the drink, not food." My English brother Solomon, that had the makings in him of one of the best and greatest men in his native country, an official among foreigners, and such foreigners. I would almost soon have seen the dear boy lying in his— "I said so," cried her brother, interpreting. "I knew it. You want to be the death of me. I shall be rendered suspected by my own sister just as I'm getting on. So you want to wish bad on me. You want to condemn me to something bad, and I'm finally making a way in my life. What's with you, sister?" "The gracious and merciful heavens forbid," cried Miss Pross. "Far rather would I never see you again, dear Solomon, though I have ever loved you truly and ever shall." Remember, she wanted Solomon to marry Lucy, her own little Lucy. Not little Lucy, but Lucy the mother. I don't know why Dickens did that. What are your thoughts? Like, it's complicated enough with all these characters. Why couldn't they just name the daughter some other name? Why did they have to name her Lucy, which is Lucy's name? And then you have little Lucy, but grown-up Lucy is little, and so it's easy to call her little Lucy. That's one of the things I don't. I mean, he controls the names. It's not like he had to name her Lucy because she was a character in history. You know, let's name her something else. Hello, Ellie. Say but one affectionate word to me and tell me that there is nothing angry or estranged between us, estranged, like separated, and I will detain you no longer. Good, Miss Pross, as if the estrangement between them had come of any culpability of hers, as if Mr. Lorry had not known it for a fact years ago in the quiet corner in Soho that this precious brother had spent her money and left her. So Miss Pross tells us about her. When she loves hard. So this brother had taken advantage of his sister and taken advantage of her money. But Miss Pross never has a bad word for him. He was saying the affectionate word, however, with a far more grudging condescension and patronage. So to look down on, to condescend or to patronize is to look down on someone. Then he could have shown if their relative merits and positions had been reversed, which is invariably the case all the world over. When Mr. Cruncher, touching him on the shoulder, hoarsely and unexpectedly interposed with the following singular question. Mr. Cruncher's going to ask a question. I say, might I ask a favor as to whether your name is John Solomon or Solomon John? The official turned towards him with sudden distrust. He had not previously ordered a word. Come, said Mr. Cruncher, speak out, which, by the way, was more than he could do himself. John Solomon or Solomon John? She calls you Solomon, and she must know, being your sister. And I know you're John, Which of the two goes first? And regarding that name of Pross, likewise, that warn't your name over the water back in England. What do you mean? Well, I don't know all I mean, for I can't call to mind what your name was over the water. No, but I'll swear it was a name of 2 syllables. Indeed. Yes, the other one's 1 syllable, You was a spy witness at the Bailey. What in the name of the father of lies, own father to yourself, was you called at that time? Barsad. Oh, my goodness. I never made that connection. I mean, I've read this book several times. I know who Barsad is, but Barsad was Miss Pross not at the trial when Barsad was there as a spy? That's the thing. You can read a book so many times and you still see something new. That's the name. For £1,000, cried Jerry. The speaker who struck in was Sidney Carton. Now, what's Sidney doing there? We've got all kinds of people there. Now, I knew he was going to be there, but I forgot when he showed up. He had his hands behind him under the skirts of his riding coat, and he stood at Mr. Cruncher's elbow as negligently as he might have stood at the Old Bailey itself. Don't be alarmed, my dear Miss Pross. I arrived at Mr. Lorry's to his surprise yesterday evening. We agreed that I would not present myself elsewhere until all was well, or unless I could be useful. I present myself here to beg a little talk with your brother. I wish you had a better employed brother than Mr. Barsad. I wish for your sake Mr. Barsad was not a sheep of the prisons. Sheep was a cant word of the time for a spy under the jailers. The spy, who was pale, turned paler, and asked him how he dared. I'll tell you, said Sidney. I lighted on you, Mr. Barsad, coming out of the prison of the Conciergerie while I was contemplating the walls an hour or more ago. You have a face to be remembered, and I remember faces well. Made curious by seeing you in that connection and having a reason. Hey, Kelly, I'm always happy when you show up, Kelly. But now I lost my place. Made curious by seeing you in that connection and having a reason to which you are no stranger for associating you with the misfortunes of a friend now very unfortunate. So remember, they're connecting Dickens for those of us that have forgotten, are connecting Barsad back to that trial of Charles Darnay. I walked in your direction. I walked into the wine shop here, close after you, and sat near you. I had no difficulty in deducing from your unreserved conversation and the rumor openly going about among your admirers the nature of your calling. And gradually, what I had done at random seemed to shape itself into a purpose, Mr. Barsad. What purpose? The spy asked. It would be troublesome and might be dangerous to explain in the street. Could you favor me in confidence with some minutes of your company at the offices of Tellson's Bank, for instance? Under a threat? Oh, did I say that? Then why should I go there? Really, Mr. Barsad, I can't say if you can't. Do you mean that you won't say, sir? The spy irresolutely asked. You apprehend me very clearly, Mr. Barsad. I won't. Carton's negligent recklessness of manner came powerfully in aid of his quickness and skill. In such a business as he had in his secret mind, and with such a man as he had to do with, his practiced eye saw it and made the most of it. Now I told you, said the spy, casting a reproachful look at his sister, if any trouble comes of this, it's your doing. He's got a character a lot like Jerry toward his sister, and Jerry's was toward his wife. And so what do you think Dickens is saying about how women were treated by family back in that time? I mean, they're just dismissive and abusive, right? Come, Mr. Barsad, exclaimed Sidney. Don't be ungrateful, but for my great respect for your sister, I might not have led up so pleasantly to a little proposal that I wish to make for our mutual satisfaction. Do you go with me to the bank? He's like, look, don't be mean to your sister. It's only for her that I've been as nice as I've been to you. And if you want to be a jerk to your sister, then I'll be a jerk to you too. I'll hear what you have to say. Yes, I'll go with you. I propose that we first conduct your sister safely to the corner of her own street. Let me take your arm, Miss Pross. This is not a good city at this time for you to be out in, unprotected. And as your escort knows, Mr. Barsad, I will invite him to Mr. Lorry's with us. Are we ready? Come then. So he said, because I'm going to take Cruncher with me to Tellson's bank because he works for Tellson, and I don't want to leave you unaccompanied on the street, so I'm going to walk you back. Miss Pross recalled soon afterwards, and to the end of her life remembered that as she pressed her hands on Sidney's arm and looked up in his face, imploring him to do no hurt to Solomon, there was a braced purpose in the arm and a kind of inspiration in the eyes, which not only contradicted his light manner, but changed and raised the man. So she sees something in Sidney Carton that's noble that she hadn't seen before. He's there helping her. She was too much occupied then with fears for her brother, who so little deserved her affection, and with Sidney's friendly reassurances adequately to heed what she observed. She only realized it later, when this story is over in her old age. She realizes there was something really telling that Sidney Carton was showing me in that moment. They left her at the corner of the street, and Carton led the way to Mr. Lorry's, which was within a few minutes' walk. John Barsad, or Solomon Pross, walked at his side. That's why he said John Solomon or Solomon John, because he's John Barsad. Mr. Lorry had now this is where this is the beginning of everything getting really complicated. So there's been a lot of twists and turns along the way, but it's going to buckle the seatbelt because that ride's going to go, what do you call it? Whiplash kind of thing. There's just going to be all kinds of unexpected things from here on out. They left her at the corner of the street, and Carton led the way to Mr. Lorry's, which was within a few minutes' walk. John Barsad, or Solomon Pross, walked at his side. Mr. Lorry had just finished his dinner and was sitting before a cheery little log or two of fire, perhaps looking into their blaze for the picture of that younger, elderly gentleman from Tellson's who had looked into the red coals at the Royal George at Dover now a good many years ago. So that's referencing where the story started. And all these years later, he's aging, and Dickens is reminding us of all the time that's passed. Hello, Luke. I'm glad you're here. Miss Pross's brother, sir, said Sidney. Mr. Barsad. Barsad, repeated the old gentleman. Barsad, I have an association with the name and with the face. I told you had a remarkable face, Mr. Barsad, observed Carton coolly. Pray, sit down. As he took a chair himself, he supplied the link that Mr. Lorry wanted by saying to him with a frown, witness at that trial? Mr. Lorry immediately remembered and regarded his new visitor with an undistinguished look of abhorrence, hatred. Mr. Barsad has been recognized by Miss Pross as the affectionate brother you have heard of, said Sidney, and has acknowledged the relationship. I pass to worse news. Darnay has been arrested again. Stuck with consternation, the old gentleman explained, what do you tell me? I left him safe and free within these 2 hours, and I'm about to return to him. Arrested for all that. When was that done, Mr. Barsad? Just now, if at all. Mr. Barsad is the best authority possible, sir, said Sidney, and I have it from Mr. Barsad's communication to a friend and brother Sheep over a bottle of wine that the arrest has taken place. He left the messengers at the gate and saw them admitted by the porter. There is no earthly doubt that he is retaken. This is such a long chapter. Mr. Lorry's business eye read in the speaker's face that it was loss of time to dwell upon the point. Okay, we just have to accept it. I'm shocked. I'm stunned. How is this fair? He's having all those thoughts in his mind, but he's a businessman, and he's like, okay, he's been taken. I've got to just move past all my emotional reaction and accept this is where we are. So let's figure it out. Confused but sensible that something might depend on his presence of mind, he commanded himself and was silently attentive. So that's true to his character. He's just going to be business. Let's be business as usual. Now I trust, said Sidney to him, that the name and influence of Dr. Manette may stand him in his good stead tomorrow. You said he would be before the tribunal tomorrow, Mr. Barsad? Yes, I believe so. In as good stead tomorrow as today, but it may not be so. I own to you, I'm shaken, Mr. Lorry, by Dr. Manette's not having the power to prevent his arrest. Hi, Jenna Grace. He may not have known of it beforehand, said Mr. Lorry, but that very circumstance would be alarming when we remember how identified he is with his son-in-law. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous. I'm not nervous, nosy. I'm so nosy. When my phone buzzes, I want to see who it is. Yeah, I5YT, you did catch me live. Cry Your Beloved Country Read Along really helps me understand. I'm so glad. That's really a good story, and I don't feel equipped to teach it. It was really an unboxing. I'd never taught it. My son had just recommended it to me, and it turns out to be useful. A lot of people are still reading it, but I just don't feel like I was prepped enough on the history of South Africa to do it justice. It would really be better taught by someone who's more knowledgeable about the subject. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. Now back to where I lost my place. That's true, Mr. Lorry acknowledged, with his troubled hand at his chin and his troubled eyes on Carton. That's my acting out of that scene. I'm troubled for you people. Sometimes I get bored and I have to do things to keep myself interested in reading. In short, said Sidney, this is a desperate time when desperate games are played for desperate stakes. Let the doctor play the winning game. I will play the losing one. No man's life here is worth purchase. Anyone carried home by the people today may be condemned tomorrow. Now the stake I have resolved to play for in case of the worst is a friend in the conciergerie, and the friend I purpose to myself to win is Mr. Barsad. You need to have good cards, sir, said the spy. I'll run them over. I'll see what I have. Mr. Lorry, you know what a brute I am. I wish you'd give me a little brandy. It was put before him, and he drank off a glassful, drunk off another glassful, pushed the bottle thoughtfully away. Mr. Barsad, he went on, in the tone of one who really was looking over a hand at cards, Sheep of the prisons, emissary of Republican committees, now turnkey, now prisoner, always spy and secret informer, so much the more valuable here for being English than an Englishman is less open to suspicion of subordination in those characters than a Frenchman, represents himself to his employers under a false name. That's a very good card, Mr. Barsad. Now, in the employ of the Republican French government, was formerly in the employ of the aristocratic English government, the enemy of France and freedom. That's an excellent card. Inference clear as day in this region of suspicion that Mr. Barsad, still in the pay of the aristocratic English government, is the spy of Pitt, the treacherous foe of the Republic crouching in its bosom, the English traitor and agent of all mischief, so much spoken of and so difficult to find. That's a card not to be beaten. Have you followed my hand, Mr. Barsad? He's intimidating him. Sidney is. And Kayla, you retracted your message, so I didn't see it. So was it funny? Here, once again, proud of myself. Hey, I'm proud of you too. Kayla, I didn't look up in time to see your message. So, Alexa, why are we laughing? Did we say something?
Thinking of my favorite joke.
Alexa, off. I have an Alexa in my house. And when I called your name, Camps, she answered me to tell me her joke because I said something about laughing. These artificial intelligence, they're listening to us. I'm going to just keep reading because we have a lot to read through. Oh. So he's intimidating him. Sydney is. Not to understand your play, returned the spy somewhat uneasily. I play my ace. Denunciation of Mr. Barsad to the nearest section committee. It's like, here's the top. This is what I'm going to do. Look over your hand, Mr. Barsad, and see what you have. Don't hurry. See if you can top. Like, do you really want to keep playing this game? He drew the bottle near, poured out another glass full of brandy, and drank it off. He saw that the spy was fearful for his drinking himself into a fit state for the immediate denunciation of him. Seeing it, he poured out and drank another glassful. Oh, Kayla, what books were you reading for school? It was a poorer hand than he suspected. Mr. Barsad saw losing cards in it that Sidney Carton knew nothing of. Thrown out of his honorable employment in England through too much unsuccessful hard swearing there, not because he was wanted there. Our English reasons for vaunting our superiority to secrecy and spies are of very modern date. He knew that he had crossed the channel and accepted service in France, first as a tempter and an eavesdropper among his own countrymen there, gradually as a tempter and eavesdropper among the natives. He knew that under the overthrown government, he had been a spy upon Saint Antoine and Defarge's wine shop, had received from the watchful police such heads of information concerning Dr. Manette's imprisonment, release, and history as should serve him for an introduction to familiar conversation with the Defarges, and tried them on Madame Defarge, and had broken down with them signally. He always remembered with fear and trembling that terrible woman had knitted when he talked with her, and had looked ominously at him as her fingers moved. He had since seen her in the section of Saint Antoine over and over again produce her knitted registers and denounce people whose lives the guillotine then surely swallowed up. Like, that's how she kept track of all that, remember, with her knitting. And we're learning that the Defarges are behind all of this. He knew, as everyone employed as he was did, that he was never safe. Oh, he knew that people like him. Hey, Yara, thank you for reminding me. I can't imagine she ever watches this many minutes in, 28 minutes in. But I haven't seen her in almost a week. I missed that little thing. So, hey, Yara. And we're at 28 minutes and I still have three pages to go. So let me stay focused. I kind of lose my focus sometimes. Once denounced, and on such grave grounds as had just now been suggested to his mind, he foresaw that the dreadful woman of whose unrelenting character he had seen many proofs would produce against him that fatal register and would quash his last chance of life. Besides that, all secret men are men soon terrified. Here were surely cards enough of one black suit to justify the holder in growing rather livid as he turned them over. You scarcely seem to like your hand, said Sidney with the greatest composure. Do you play? Suhani? Hey. I think, sir, said the spy in the meanest manner as he turned to Mr. Lorry, I may appeal to a gentleman of your years and benevolence to put it to this other gentleman, so much your junior, whether he can under any circumstances reconcile it to his station, to play that ace of which he has spoken. I admit that I am a spy, and that it is considered a discreditable station, though it must be filled by somebody. But this gentleman is no spy. And why would he so demean himself as to make himself one? I play my ace, Mr. Barsad, said Carton, taking the answer on himself and looking at his watch, without any scruple, in a very few minutes. I'm going to show you. You better decide. The time's almost up. I could not better testify my respect for your sister than by finally relieving her of her brother, said Sidney Carton. You think not, sir? I have thoroughly made up my mind about it. The smooth manner of the spy, curiously in dissonance, like not in harmony, with his ostentatiously rough dress, like what's a modern day word for ostentatious? Like really showy, really not bougie. I'm really curious if y'all have a word that's ostentatious to dress in a way to call attention to yourself, and it's just over the top. And probably with his usual demeanor, received such a check from the inscrutability of Carton, who was a mystery to wiser and honester men than he, that it faltered here and failed him. While he was at a loss, Carton said, resuming his former air of contemplating cards, and indeed, now I think again, I have a strong impression that I have another good card here, not yet enumerated, not yet counted. That friend and fellow sheep who spoke of himself as pastoring in the country prisons, who was he? French. You don't know him, said the spy quickly. French, eh? Repeated Carton, musing, and not appearing to notice him at all, though he echoed the word. Well, he may be. Is, I assure you, said the spy, though it's not important. Though it's not important, repeated Carton in the same mechanical way. Though it's not important. No, it's not important. No. Yet I know the face. I think not. I'm sure not. It can't be, said the spy. It can't be, muttered Sidney Carton, retrospectively and filling his glass, which fortunately was a small one again. Can't be. Spoke good French. Yet, like a foreigner, I think. Provincial, said the spy. No, foreign, cried Carton, striking like he's really good at this poker game. He's really intimidating and saying, I know more than you think I know. And Barsad's like, you can't know. It's impossible. This guy is who I know him to be. And Carton's putting doubt into his mind. Striking his open hand on the table as the light broke clearly on his mind. Cly, disguised, but the same man. We had that man before us at the Old Bailey. Now, there you are, hasty sir, said Barsad with a smile that gave his aquiline nose, like a strong, pointy nose, aquiline nose, an extra inclination to one side. There you really give me an advantage over you. Cly, who I will unreservedly admit at this distance of time was a partner of mine, has been dead several years. I attended him in his last illness. He was buried in London at the church of St. Pancras in the Fields. His unpopularity with the blackguard multitude at the moment prevented my following his remains, but I helped to lay him in his coffin. Here, Mr. Lorry became aware, from where he sat, of a most remarkable goblin shadow on the wall. Tracing it to its source, he discovered it to be caused by a sudden extraordinary rising and stiffening of all the risen and stiff hair on Mr. Cruncher's head. Let us be reasonable, said the spy. Let us be fair. To show you how mistaken you are, and what an unfounded assumption yours is, I will lay before you the certificate of Clive's burial, which I happen to have carried in my pocketbook. With a hurried hand, he produced and opened it. Ever since. There it is. Oh, look at it. Look at it. You may take it in your hand. It's no forgery. Here, Mr. Lorry perceived the reflection on the wall to elongate, and Mr. Cruncher rose and stepped forward. His hair could not have been more violently on end if it had been that moment dressed by the cow with the crumpled horn in the house that Jack built. So they're about to reveal that this man that Barsad thought was dead, they all know this inside story. Unseen by the spy, Mr. Cruncher stood at his side and touched him on the shoulder like a ghostly bailiff. That there Roger Cly, master, said Mr. Cruncher, with a taciturn and iron-bound visage. So you put him in his coffin? I did. Who took him out of it? Barsad leaned back in his chair and stammered, what do you mean? I mean, said Mr. Cruncher, that he weren't never in it. No, not he. I'll have my head took off if he was ever in it. The spy looked round at the two gentlemen. They both looked in unspeakable astonishment at Jerry. I tell you, said Jerry, that you buried paving stones and earth in that there coffin. Don't go and tell me that you buried Cly. It was a take-in. Me and two more's note. How do you know it? What's that to you? If caught, growled Cruncher. It's you. I've got an old grudge again, is it? With your shameful imposition upon tradesmen? I'd catch hold of your throat and choke you for half a guinea. Sidney Carton, who with Mr. Lorry had been lost in amazement at this turn of the business, here requested that Mr. Cruncher moderate and explain himself. At another time, sir, he returned evasively. The present time is ill convenient for explaining. What I stand to is this, that he knows well what that there were Cly was never in that there coffin. Let him say he was. In so much as a word of one syllable, I'll either catch hold of his throat and choke him for half a guinea. Remember, he was a grave robber, so if they filled the coffin with rocks, and then Cruncher went to steal, the rings and the jewelry from the coffin, he opens it and he just finds a coffin of rocks. Or I'll out and announce him. Humph, I see one thing, said Carton. I hold another card, Mr. Barsad. Impossible here in raging Paris, with suspicion filled the air, for you to outlive denunciation. When you are in communication with another aristocratic spy of the same antecedents as yourself, who, moreover, has a mystery about him of having feigned death and come to life again, a plot in the prisons of the foreigner against the Republic, a strong card, a certain guillotine card. Do you play? No, returned the spy. I throw up. I confess that we were so unpopular with the outrageous mob that I only got away from England at the risk of being tucked to death. And that Cly was so ferreted up and down that he never would have got away at all but for that sham. Though how this man knows it was a sham is a wonder of wonders to me. So he made all this up to escape, and the two of them escaped. Never you trouble your head about this man, retorted the contentious, difficult, argumentative Mr. Cruncher. You'll have trouble enough with giving your attention to that gentleman. And look here, once more, Mr. Cruncher could not be restrained from making rather an ostentatious parade of his liberality. I'd catch hold of your throat and choke you for half a guinea. The sheep of the prisons turned from him to Sidney Carton and said, with more decision, it has come to a point. I go on duty soon and can't overstay my time. You told me you had a proposal. What is it? Now, it is of no use asking too much of me. Ask me to do anything in my office, putting my head in great extra danger, and I had better trust my life to the chances of a refusal than the chances of consent. We are all desperate here. Remember, I may denounce you if I think proper, and I can swear my way through stone walls, and so can others. Now, what do you want with me? Not very much. You are a turnkey at the conciergerie. I tell you once for all, there is no such thing an escape possible, said the spy firmly. Why need you tell me what I have not asked? You are a turnkey at the conciergerie. I am sometimes. You can be when you choose. I can pass in and out when I choose. Sidney Carton filled another glass with brandy, poured it slowly out upon the earth, and watched it as it dropped. It being all spent, he said, so far, we have spoken before these two, because it was as well that the merits of the cards should not rest solely between you and me. Come into the dark room here, and let us have one final word alone. And that is chapter 8. Now, I was lost on this section. It is the first time it's all come together for me. I can't explain the importance of this without giving away the ending, and I don't really need to explain it because I understood the story without understanding all this part the last time I watched or read it. But basically, all of that was to say that Sidney Carton has a hold over Barsad, and Barsad has the key to the prison where Charles Darnay is. And so Barsad's like, nobody can escape. You can't, just because you have a key, you can't get in and out. And Sidney Carton says, did I ask you for that? Come, let's talk privately. And they're making a plan. That's all I'm going to do. And Barsad, who is also Solomon, is the brother of Miss Pross. And interesting that, Dickens is telling us good and bad people. We've got all these family relationships, and I want you to pay attention to that. We've got the French nobility. We've got Evrémonde, Charles Darnay, who is part of the evil French nobility, and yet he's good. We've got Manette, who is French, with Lucy, and they're all good. We've got Miss Pross, who is, honorable, and lightning starting. We've got Miss Pross, who is honorable, but this brother who's dirty dealer. We've got Jerry Cruncher, who's doing these shady things, but does the honorable thing. So what do you think Dickens, and I keep talking about honor, and you'll see where this is going. But what is Dickens saying about honor and family relationships and how you're born? Is it just because of your birth, does that define who you are in life? I want you to really ask yourself that. I remember a story that my mother used to tell me when she was a young girl. And if she would go, as she would go out for the evening, very conservative time. She was born in 1937. So as a teenager, would have been early 50s, right? And hi, Prism, I'm glad you're back. My grandfather was very involved in his church. He was a deacon of the church, which was like a position of respect. They watched the money. They helped take care of the church. You know, it was a community member that was upstanding. So whenever my mother would go out, my grandfather would always say, remember, you're the daughter of a deacon, which is like to say, remember who you are in your family, which is so important. But what is Dickens saying about being from a reputable family? Or if you're from the nobility family, does that mean you're a better person? And we're seeing that Charles Darnay rejected what the nobility was doing. And we're seeing Cruncher, who's just kind of this trashy guy, making the right choice in that moment to be protective. So lots of that theme being developed here for those of you that are doing this for AP. For those of you that are just reading along to read along, thank you for being here. We got another one in the books. And I think this ends at chapter, what did I tell you? 15, right? Put my glasses back on so I see those tiny little words. Yeah, 15. So if I'm on chapter 9 and there's 15 more, 6 more chapters, right? And it's going to get good. So animals is we. Thank you for being here. All my viewers, thank you for being here. All the thumbs up, thank you. If you haven't subscribed, let's do it. We're almost about to break to 13,000. Not a huge number, but I'm so excited that we keep growing and people keep wanting to read. And I need to cultivate more readers because I cannot keep up with the request of books that need to be read. So keep reading. Those of you that started back to school, go get it. Go after it. For those of you that are not starting back to school, relax, but get your summer reading done. For those of you that are in school, don't you miss those days of being off for 2 months at a time. We just get back up because tomorrow's Wednesday. I lose track of time. And back to the grind. I work in the office tomorrow. I'm in the office 2 out of 5 days. 3 of the days I work from home because of COVID. And I'm in Louisiana where it's just all over the place. I would love them to tell me we could just work from home every day instead of worrying about being exposed. Quiet little mouses. Thanks for your joining me. I know you pop in every now and then, and I appreciate you. You guys have a lovely evening, the great rest of your summer, and I will read to you next time. See ya.